The auction smelled like burnt coolant and desperation. Durith 9 wasn't on any tourist route. It sat in that gray no-man's land between three territorial borders where no empire wanted to pay to patrol. So nobody did. Ships came here to die. Cargo came here to vanish. And people, debt on their records and stars in their eyes, came hunting for something worth saving before someone else melted it down. Cass Ryan had been coming to Durith 9 for nearly 2 decades. He wasn't tall or striking. His jacket was patched at the elbows. A scar cut his left brow from a loader accident when he was young and too stubborn to step aside. He moved with a confidence born of having lost everything once and lived through it. The auction yard sprawled across 3 pressurized bays, maybe 400 hulks tagged with orange disposal markers, priced at scrap. Vorax merchants in layered silk clustered at the new lots. Resi traders ran 6-fingered hands along engine casings. Nobody paid attention to the human. Nobody ever did. Cass threaded the crowd to the far end of Bay 3, where the real junk lived. Stuff so long abandoned, it had grown its own rust ecosystem. He almost missed it. Bow section of a colossal hull, dark as if absorbing light instead of reflecting it. His scanner spat back unclassified on the alloy. Impossible, given the compact materials archive. Reactor probe, dead. Dimensional sweep, 840 meters. Auction tag, 40,000 credits. No bids. He waited. The auctioneer droned 2 rows over. A salvage cutter somewhere in Bay 1 hammered in the distance. Cass lifted his bid paddle. A merchant laughed, a wet, bubbling sound among the Vorax. Nobody else bid. The gavel fell. That night, Cass slipped through a hull breach with a handheld light and a salvager's instinct that said he hadn't been wrong. Inside, the corridors were vast, built for human bodies, but with ceiling clearances suggesting heavier, armored occupants. Walls pressed with geometric reliefs ran floor to ceiling, patterns his light chased but couldn't quite catch. The metal was warm, not from the station but from within. Warm, the way a living thing is warm. Cass touched the relief and pulled back. 400 meters of dark, breathing ship stretched ahead. He felt a kind of wonder he hadn't felt since seeing his first hyperspace jump. He sat down on a dead ship's floor and stayed. 2 days later, Jack Sarin came aboard, took one look and said, "Absolutely not." Then crawled inside to map the grid. Jax complained like some people breathed. Constant, rhythmic, not meaningless. She was the best engineer Cass had ever known. Compact, razor-featured, once restarted a fusion core with a battery pack and copper wire. She declared every ship the same problem in a different disguise for 6 hours until she found the reactor and went very quiet. Cass, her voice over calm, stripped of sarcasm. "I see it. This is not standard." "I know," he answered. "Not fusion, not anything in my training." "That," he said, "is why I called Ilara." Dr. Ilara Morn arrived on day 3 looking like someone who hadn't slept since the distress ping. A former xenoarchaeologist, stripped of credentials for a paper that argued humanity's spacefaring past was older than anyone admitted, she moved through the breach and sat on the floor, hands trembling as she pressed them to the inscriptions. Her scanner ran protocols and closed her eyes. "This script," she whispered, "is a root antecedent of 17 modern human tongues. It predates written record by roughly 40,000 years." Sarin on the comm from 3 decks down. "That's not possible." Ilara stood, eyes fierce. "This ship was built by humans, Not our modern humans, but our ancestors, before the compact, before the Vorax hegemony. They worked for 3 days. Saren traced conduits that were elegant where modern engineering was only efficient. On night 4, she hooked a salvage cell to what she called a secondary grid, shrugged and said, "If this blows us up, note my reservations," and threw the switch. The ship exhaled. Corridor lights bled on, dim amber, ancient but alive. Then the voice, not through speakers, but the metal itself. Low, resonant syllables that broke every translator. Ilara grabbed her pad, fingers flying. The voice spoke for 4 seconds and went silent. She looked up, still as a scientist whose life has condensed into a single confirmed fact. "What did it say?" Cass asked. "One word," Ilara said. "Air." Inspector Carr Voss arrived with the quiet menace of a man who never learned to take no for an answer. Vorax, tall, scaled amber, with the measured certainty of a military elite. He came with aides, a legal pad, and the look of a man treating the scene as bureaucracy, not discovery. "Under Article 47 of the Compact Heritage Preservation Act," he intoned, "any unregistered vessel of historical origin discovered in compact-adjacent space is subject to immediate cultural assessment and reclassification as a protected artifact. The vessel will fall under hegemony cultural authority pending full evaluation." Cass leaned on the hull, pleasant. "Appreciate the personal visit. That's quite a trip for a courtesy call." "This is not a courtesy." "Right." Cass scratched his neck. "I filed a registered salvage claim with Durath 9 Port Authority. Time-stamped, notarized, 6 days before your arrival under the Compact Free Salvage Charter, Section 12C. A legitimately purchased derelict cannot be retroactively reclassified without a full tribunal review, minimum processing window, 90 days. Carr's eyes narrowed. "I also filed an ownership dispute under Section 19, which freezes competing claims, and a modification permit classifying the vessel as a work-in-progress restoration, further complicating seizure." Cass didn't say he needed every hour of that time because Saren was 3 decks below with her hands inside a 40,000-year-old coupling, murmuring to herself. Carr left, his pause at the breach and single backward glance telling Cass everything. He wasn't conceding. He was reporting. Inside, Ilara had turned a chamber into an archive room. Circular walls covered with densely inscribed panels. "How much trouble are we in?" she asked without looking up. "The kind that has a fleet attached," Cass said. "What do you have?" She smiled like a cathedral bell. "Everything. This isn't just a warship, it's a record. History, doctrine, science, nav charts. 40,000 years of a civilization pressed into its walls because they knew they might not survive. They spoke to whoever came next. Then we need to wake it all up before the hegemony takes it." Saren's voice came over comms. "Cass, the secondary grid's online. Something just lit on Deck 1 that wasn't on my schematic. I think the ship noticed us." The ship didn't introduce itself. It began to speak through every panel, a resonant voice that filled the air with presence. Ilara translated as best she could. "Recognition sequence, biological scan, checking genetic heritage markers." "Meaning?" Saren demanded. "It wants to know if we're who it's been waiting for." The lighting warmed toward gold. Doors unsealed. Slowly, deliberately, the ship announced, "Genetic lineage confirmed. Commander-class heritage detected. Beginning integration protocol." Then it spoke a name, older and formal, like title braided to blood. Ilara wrote it down and stared. "It's calling you an air commander," she said. "Your lineage carries the authorization key." "You're not just compatible with the ship, Cass," she stopped. "You're the closest genetic match to the ship's last registered commander in 40,000 years." The ship's AI. Cass and Ilara began to call it Arche, fed him doctrine and systems in sleep cycle bursts through the command seat. Not dry logs, but living memory, tactical philosophy, weapons discipline, the operational logic of a warship meant to bond to one mind. The ancients believed a warship wasn't a vehicle, but a relationship. The humans supplied instinct and will. The ship supplied reach and memory. Arche had been alone for 40 millennia. While Saren worked 18-hour shifts and Alara mapped archives, Cass spent nights in the prime seat. The throne adjusted to him. Haptic nodes finding nerve clusters, displays curving into his natural sight. Arche showed him engagement logs. The last campaign, a nameless war in which the ancients faced something they called the Unraveling, a predator that absorbed tech and knowledge, assimilating civilizations rather than conquering them. Conventional arms became the enemy's arms. So they did the unlearnable. They scattered, regressed, hid, and left behind sleeping ships to wait for descendants who might remember. "How many ships?" Cass asked. A pulse through the throne bloomed a nav map. 11 points of light, scattered along an arc. 11 ships sleeping, waiting. He'd found the first. And then the Vorax fleet arrived, 16 days early. They were in the archive chamber when the proximity tone, low and resonant, rang. "Saren, I see them," Cass said. "3 cruisers and a hegemony dreadnought," she answered flat. "Sovereign class, guns pre-charged. They mean it." Through the prime seat's viewport, not a screen but real transparel, Cass watched 4 ships hold position 2,000 kilometers off the bow. A practiced intercept. A cold broadcast cut through. "Vessel of unknown registry. Illegal seizure order issued under Compact Heritage Protocol and confirmed by Vorax Hegemony Military Authority. You have 2 hours to evacuate. Failure to comply will result in forced boarding. No further negotiation." 2 hours, Cass said. "Saren needs 4. "I know." He opened the channel. "Vorax Fleet Command. Cass Rian, registered salvage operator under Compact Free Charter. Acknowledge receipt of order. Beginning evacuation protocol." Then, to Saren, "You have 90 minutes. The primary weapons coupling's sealed. It's a bollock. I think it only opens from the prime seat." He sat, Arche responding instantly, the haptics rising like a hand finding his. He pressed the bollock glyph on the display. Deep in the hull, something unlocked. "Oh," Saren whispered. "That's what's under there." 90 minutes stretched like a lifetime. Arche guided him through weapon activation with patient precision. At 88 minutes, Saren reported. "Mostly ready. Forward batteries full, rear at 60%. Gravitic shear field online. I have no idea what it does, but it draws more power than a Vorax dreadnought." At 91 minutes, the Vorax repeated. "Evacuation window closing. Prepare to receive boarding." Cass settled into the seat. The ship settled with him. Arche hummed, ready. "Let's see what 40,000 years of sleep does for temperament," he said. He brought hull systems to life. The prime ship flared, dark metal to blazing gold-white in 2 seconds, running lights igniting along structural lines that hadn't seen day in millennia. The gravitic shear field rose, invisible, a sphere 200 meters from the hull. The Vorax lead fired, a focused plasma bolt meant to cut steel in a heartbeat. It struck the field and stopped like an ember caught midair, suspended and cooling. Alarms screamed across the Vorax fleet. Cass opened the broadcast in a voice calmer than he felt. "Vorax Fleet Command, this is Cass Rian. Let's talk about the treaty you're about to want." He didn't threaten. Arche had been running passive tactical analysis since the fleet appeared. Hull tolerances, coupling locations, reactor cycles, ordnance counts calculated from displacement. In 30 seconds, Arche assembled a complete vulnerability profile.
Cass broadcasted it widely. Station comms, civilian relays, trading buoys. Clean and clinical, like a weather report. Then, as a footnote, he added Arke's targeting sequence. The precise pattern to neutralize all 4 Vorax vessels in 3 minutes and 52 seconds. Silence snapped across the fleet. Time thinned. Then a white observer vessel dropped out of FTL at the edge of the zone. The compact Neutral Observer Corps, called by Alara 3 days earlier. Recording began, broadcasting on every channel. An unarmed human salvager had been fired upon. The bolt had never hit the hull. The compact couldn't ignore a documented attack on a legal operator or the larger claim Alara uploaded. 200 pages of translated archive authenticated under Discovery Protocol. Proof that humanity had an advanced civilization 40,000 years before the compact. Proof that the Vorax hegemony, 6 centuries of dominance built on being the oldest, was younger than the people it had treated as second class. Within the hour, the compact convened emergency sessions. The Vorax ships withdrew without formal word. A turn and silence that told Cass more than any communique. He sat in the prime seat long after their blips vanished. Saren appeared with 2 cups of ship-brewed coffee, terrible, essential, and said, "We just made enemies of the most powerful military force in the region." She paused. "We were already enemies. Now they know it." Arke was still running projections. "They'll come back," she said. "I know." Cass looked at the map. 11 lights, patient in the dark. "That's why we won't be here when they do," he said. News moves faster than fleets. Faster than tribunals, faster than suppression orders. Word spread across a dozen systems and 100 colonies. A human bought junk and woke a 40,000-year-old dreadnought. A human faced down a hegemony fleet and didn't fire a shot. Across stations, laborers and traders paused and listened. And then, something changed. People straightened a little. Hope is contagious. Cass, 3 weeks into low-powered transit to avoid prying eyes, followed Arke's coordinates to the second dormant vessel. Saren slept for the first time in 6 days. Ilara remained in the archive chamber, surrounded by notes. Cass learned the personal logs Arke kept, messages from commanders in the weeks before the final campaign. They were not speeches, but tired, tender records. "We hope you are like us. We hope what we pass down in blood is enough. We built these ships to end a war. We are leaving them because the war continues. The thing the unraveling cannot copy is sacrifice. Guard it." He paused playback and let the weight sit in the dark between stars. Then he looked at Ark's map. 11 ships. 2 more would need months of work. Others were coordinates and trust and 40,000 years of hope. The ancients had hidden them in geologically stable blind spots beyond major empires. They'd planned meticulously. Maybe they'd planned exactly how long it would take. 6 months later, there were 3. The second ship rose from under a moon's worth of sediment on an uninhabited world. Excavation nearly ended them twice. Saren outwitted a Vorax drone with a false signal to buy time. When the second ship woke, it greeted the human crew in the ancient tongue Ilara had traced to the earliest route. It called them home. The third ship found them, detecting the active signature of the prime seat and answering in the way engineers had hoped centuries ago. The 3 ancient dreadnoughts navigated together now, running lights burning like golden beacons. Around them moved a ragged convoy of volunteers. 40-odd vessels, student-run research ships, resigned academics, independent traders who stayed to watch. Cass stood at the prime seat's viewport,
ragged on little sleep, but sharper than ever. He'd given testimony to the compact, warded off Vorax intercepts, and shepherded an emerging human coalition. He was tired and awake all at once. "Ark," he said. The ship's ambient hum shifted, attentive, familiar. "Show me the map." 8 points remained unvisited. 8 ships were still patient in the dark. Saren joined him with coffee. "The Hegemony Supreme Council voted last week," she said. "They requested formal treaty negotiations. First time in 6 centuries they've asked anything of humans." "And Alara?" Cass asked. She lowered her voice. "She thinks the unraveling is recurring, that the ancients bought time, not solved the problem." "And you're still going after the other 8 ships?" "Yes." Saren nodded, looking out at 3 ancient dreadnoughts moving like slow, inevitable promises. "For what it's worth," she said, "I've stopped having reservations." Across the compact, things shifted. The Vorax Supreme Admiral recalculated scenarios he'd never considered. Researchers unshackled by Alara's evidence published again. The Council of Species accelerated a review that could upend a legal order of 6 centuries. And in the archive chamber of the Prime Seat, the panels hummed softly, patient no longer, but ready. Cass set down his coffee, settled into the Prime Seat, and felt the ship recognize him. 8 points of light on the map. He leaned forward. "Ark," he said, "take us home."